and just say a few words to you about the general election on the 8th of June, and then give you an opportunity to ask me some questions. And as we look ahead to the 8th of June, this is a really important time, I think, for the future of our country. And there is an important choice to be made at the election, because the next 5 years really matters. And getting it right for the next 5 years matters because so much hangs on it. Our future prosperity, our place in the world, our standard of living, the opportunities we want for our children and our children's children. And I'm going to be out and about around the country over the next 23 days, showing people why I believe that this is an important election. I think we need an election now to give us the strong and stable leadership for the future that will get the right deal from Europe, but also build a better Britain for the future. And as I say, I'm going to be out and about around the country over the next 23 days. I want to earn every vote I can to enable me to give you that leadership and lead the country forward. Because if we look ahead, Brexit actually offers us opportunities for the future. And it's important that we seize those opportunities. And we need the strong and stable government and leadership to be able to do that. And the first thing, of course, that we need to do is to get the best deal for Britain from Europe. Build a deep and special partnership with Europe that will give us that good relationship that will be good for businesses like this and businesses across the rest of the country. But if we get the Brexit deal right, of course, that will enable us to give a better deal for ordinary working people here at home. And that means a government that has a plan for the future, and I will be taking my plan for a stronger Britain out to people over the remaining days of this election campaign. And government has a role to play in that. It's important that we ensure that there's a good school place for every child, so that youngsters get the best possible start in life. We need to ensure that we lock in economic growth so we can fund a first-class national health service. We need to tackle and take action in relation to people's standard of living, the cost of living, and also ensure that government is really at the service of ordinary working people. Now, I've already started to set out some policies that I think follow through on that. We've announced a new generation of social housing with a new right to buy for tenants. We've announced protection for workers' pensions from irresponsible bosses, new mental health laws to tackle injustice, action to end the injustice of rip-off energy bills by putting a cap on energy price rises. And yesterday, I announced the biggest ever enhancement to workers' rights that's ever been proposed by a Conservative government. And there are a number of elements to that. First of all, we will protect the rights that are currently guaranteed by EU law when we leave the European Union. But we'll also enhance rights in a number of ways. So we've announced a right to time off when a parent loses a child, a right to request time off for training, a right to have time off to care for a family member. We'll also ensure that the national living wage rises with median earnings over the rest of over the next Parliament. We will ensure that our discrimination laws enable us to tackle the problem of discrimination in the workplace of people with intermittent mental health conditions. We will ensure there's workers' representation on company boards, and we'll look to introduce returnships, so to help people who perhaps have taken time out from the workplace to be able to get back into the workplace. And we'll also look at the issue of racial disparity in pay by introducing more transparency in that area too. I think that these sorts of policies are exactly what we need in order to ensure that we are doing the best for ordinary working families and ordinary working people up and down the country. It will take strong leadership and a strong government to do that. It won't just happen. We need that strong and stable government with a plan to take this country forward. As I say, I'm going to be out and about in the remaining days now until the general election, talking to people, listening to people, and earning every vote I can. And if I earn that support, then I really do believe that together we can build a better future for this country. Thank you. take some questions, as we said. Yes, over here.
When you get re-elected,
would you like a microphone so everybody can hear your question? Or?
Yeah, when you get re-elected Prime Minister, have you got plans for NHS and defence budget?
NHS and?
Defence budget.
Defence budget, yes. And we will be, just so everybody knows, we will be publishing our manifesto later this week, so you'll see all the details. What I think is important for our NHS, of course, we have been putting extra funding into the NHS, and we announced, even in the budget back a couple of months ago, we announced some extra funding, for example, particularly for accident and emergency, to help improve the service in certain hospitals for accident and emergency. We want to ensure that being in the NHS is an attractive profession. We see more doctors and nurses there. We'll set out in detail in the manifesto our proposals for the NHS for the future, but what I want to do is to ensure that we have a strong NHS, a first-class NHS. We can only do that if we're generating the funds from the economy to be able to pay for it. And similarly, we want to ensure that we're putting sufficient money into our defence budget, and we'll remain committed to 2% of our GDP being spent on defence, but also that in each year the defence budget will rise by 0.5% above inflation, so real terms and a little bit more. I think I saw a hand over here, yes?
Why do you think the Conservative Party are the best party to take us through Brexit?
I think we're the best party to take us through Brexit because I think there's two things you need if you're looking at Brexit. First of all, you do need to be pretty strong in what are going to be tough negotiations with Europe. We've seen in recent weeks some of the, it is going to be tough, some of the things that have been said about our future. And we're committed, we're the only party that is really committed to ensuring that we do this. I think it's important. People voted for Brexit, and I think whatever side of the argument people were on at the time, I think most people now just want us to get on with it and do it well. And so we've got the plan to take us through those negotiations. I've set out what our proposals are for the sort of relationship we want with Europe in the future. And I want the best possible relationship for trade so that businesses can thrive here. But we want to do more than Brexit. And it's about not just getting to Brexit, it's about having a plan that takes us beyond. And things like our modern industrial strategy, making sure that prosperity and growth can be really spread across the whole of the UK, are an important part of that. Yes, gentleman here, and then I'll come to the back.
The cost of living has gone high since Brexit. I have a family of 7. What are you going to do to bring the cost of living down?
Well, there's some things, you're right, the cost of living is, when we are seeing inflation, obviously, has gone up slightly. There's the impact of what's happened to the currency is partly about that. But there are things that we can do, like on energy prices, because I see too many people paying over the odds for their energy, which is an important, is an important key fundamental for you if you've got a family and looking after your family. So doing something on something like that is important. But longer term, it's about actually making sure that we've got the strong economy that can support jobs. I'd like to see, higher paid jobs, more people, investment in this country so that we can create that environment where people are able to see a better future in terms of their cost of living, but also a better future for their children.
But the price of food's going higher and higher, rising dramatically since the last 6 months.
There is an impact in relation to the price of food. What we need to do is to make sure that we get that Brexit deal right. There will be some uncertainty for business and people over the next couple of years as we're doing that negotiation. But what we need to do is make sure that we get that negotiation right, so we get the best possible deal. Because our future and what our cost of living is in the future depends on us being able to do that and have a really good economy. And coming up with proposals which will only end, like the Labour Party has today, which will end with people paying the price for those policies, doesn't help in terms of people's cost of living or in terms of being able to fund our public services for the future. Now, there was a hand right at the back there that I saw. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, hi there. Very encouraging to see you as a Member of Parliament working closely with your constituency. Many Members of Parliament do work very, very hard, but there is quite a low turnout at elections sometimes. What would you encourage the electorate to do, And what more can MPs do to make sure we do get a good turnout?
Well, you're right, and thank you, because of course the last Screwfix building that I went into was the new one in Maidenhead in my constituency, and was very pleased to be able to do that. I think we should all be giving a message to people at this election that it is really crucially important in terms of the choice that is available to people, and that it is about the future of our country. I think it is the most crucial election we've faced in my lifetime, because we're at this important moment of change for the country in terms of Brexit and then going forward beyond Brexit. So I would encourage everybody to go out and vote, and I think it's important for all of us involved in this, whoever we are, to go out there and encourage people to go out and vote, because it is about people's future. Thank you. Are there any more from me? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, Stoke-on-Trent was hit quite hard when the industries left. What would be the plans to bring back investment into our city?
Well, I was pleased. I was here a few weeks ago with Jack, actually, looking at the way the ceramics industry in Stoke has actually been reignited, if you like, and there's some real success stories here. Just hearing about this building and the work you do here and the hundreds of people employed here, this is a great success story as well. So I think, but what we want to do as a government, we've published ideas of what we call our modern industrial strategy, which is about looking at different parts of the country and different sectors of industry, saying how can we encourage growth across the whole country, where there are benefits, where there are particular clusters of expertise, can we encourage those to grow even further and really create that sort of hubs and incentives for industry. And so our industrial strategy will be aiming to roll out to make sure that that prosperity is going across the whole of the country. And obviously, as I've just said, you've got some advantages here in Stoke in existing industries that could be built on for the future. Gentleman there.
What are your plans? Sorry. What are your plans for the tax-free allowance come 2022?
For the, you mean for the personal allowance? You mean the?
I'm having to defend everything that the Tories do because I'm a Conservative member. So, what are the plans for the tax-free allowance?
Well, I'm not. I'm going to disappoint you in that I'm not setting out tax plans until you see the manifesto later this week. All I would say is that, of course, what we've done as a Conservative government is raise the personal allowance. We've taken overall about 4 million people across the whole country out of paying income tax altogether. And by raising the allowance, there's been a tax cut, which is effectively, for a basic rate taxpayer, the equivalent of about £1,000 a year. So we are a low tax party, but our manifesto will come out later this week. Question here. Sorry, I'm making the microphone.
Obviously, in the election before, obviously on Brexit, UKIP did a lot for that because of immigration. You know, I voted UKIP, and I think 7%, probably 7 out of 10 people voted on immigration. What are your plans for immigration?
Yeah, well, this is an area where, and you're right, because I believe too that for some people who voted at the referendum, immigration was one of the issues they were concerned about. Of course, I was Home Secretary for 6 years, and during that time we brought a number of changes into the immigration rules for people coming from outside the EU. Now, we think that numbers should be brought down. We want to control our borders. I think that's important. We think that numbers should be brought down to sustainable levels, and we continue to think sustainable levels are in the tens of thousands. But in immigration, there's no one thing you do that suddenly makes the numbers go down to that level. You have to constantly work at it. What we will now be able to do when we leave the EU, of course, is bring in rules for people coming from the EU into the UK, as we have rules for people coming from outside the EU into the UK. So that will enable us to control that element of immigration that previously was not, with free movement, we were not able to control. But I think there's a very clear, we as a party were quite early to recognise that this was a concern for people and to look to put some control into our immigration rules, and will continue to do so. I'll take perhaps, the gentleman with the hat's been waving, and then I'll take one more question over there, and then I'll come to the media. Don't worry, I will come to you.
Yesterday you said you wouldn't debate Jeremy Corbyn because you don't think the public want to see politicians shout at each other. which is pretty much Prime Minister's questions every Wednesday. How are we expected to see you as a strong leader when you won't debate the opposition?
Well, as you've yourself said, I've debated the opposition virtually every Wednesday since I became Prime Minister. What I think is important in elections is to be able to do things like this. Actually get out and take questions from people in a variety of settings, in workplaces and in other ways too, rather than just having that sort of TV set-up debate, which normally ends up with the politicians, as you say, having a go at each other, rather than actually being able to answer people's questions. I did an event yesterday, Facebook Live, people able to put questions into ITV on Facebook, and for 45 minutes just did a sort of quick-fire answers, trying to answer as many questions as possible from people and answering directly to them. And I think that's what's important. People will make their choice, but I think I want to give people an opportunity to be able to ask me questions direct in that way. I think there's a lady back there.
Hi, Prime Minister. Following on from the Brexit theme, in terms of once we do leave Europe, are there any plans that you may have to introduce a tax or a levy for foreign vehicles using our roads in the same way that we do when we go across to Europe?
Now, there's an interesting question. It's something that has, over time, various governments have actually looked at that as a possibility. And there have always been various logistical issues that have actually led to us not from doing that. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, it's not something that I've looked at this stage. I know it's something that a lot of people do worry about, obviously particularly people in the haulage industry. But it's not something we're looking at the moment. Now I will come to the media, and let's take ITV. Is that yes?
Emily Morgan from ITV News. Prime Minister, Labour have said today that they won't raise national insurance. They'll provide free childcare for every family and increase the national living wage to £10 an hour. They're all policies aimed at working people. If you really are the party of working people, will you also make such pledges? And if I may, a second question. Your response to reports that President Trump has disclosed classified information to the Russians.
Well, first of all, on the second issue that you've raised, I mean, I don't, as you know, I don't comment on issues that may or may not relate to security matters, so we won't comment on that, and it's not up to me what President Trump says to anybody that he's meeting and talking to. On the first issue, what I would say about this is you've mentioned some ideas that are in Labour's manifesto. If we look overall at that manifesto, I think it shows what we knew all along, which is basically it doesn't add up. And if you look across that manifesto, the question isn't what people are promising, but can you believe that people will deliver what they're promising? You can only fund our National Health Service, you can only have the funding that we've made available in relation to childcare if you've got that strong economy. What we see from Labour's proposals today, as I say, is that they don't add up, and their nonsensical economic policies would mean that actually it was ordinary working families who would pay the price of Labour's coalition of chaos. I'll take the BBC.
You're in a room full of workers, Prime Minister. Will you guarantee to all the staff here, just as George Osborne did in 2015, that the living wage will reach £9 an hour by 2020?
The national living wage will rise in line with median earnings. That was always the commitment that was made, and that will remain the commitment. Beth.
Sky News. Prime Minister, just to follow up on Eleanor's question, you say inflation's up slightly. It's actually up at a near 4-year high and is now clearly outstripping wages. Now, you say you're the party for working people and pensioners, but under a potential new Tory government, pensioners will be poorer unless you recommit to the triple lock, and workers could be poorer unless you actually do commit to what George Osborne said in 2015, which was he would lift the national living wage to £9 by 2020. Can you give both all the workers here and also pensioners some reassurances that as inflation ramps up, they won't be poorer under your government?
Well, I've been very clear that pensions will continue to rise under a Conservative government. How we calculate that will be set out in our manifesto. What we have seen over the last few years is an increase in pensioners' income through the basic state pension. If you remember, under Labour, we had 1 year when the rise was 75p. The rise in basic state pension is now equal to £1,250 a year, so a significant improvement there for pensions, and pensions will continue to go up under a Conservative government. And as I've said, the national living wage has always been committed in relation to rising in line with median earnings, and that's what we will do for the future. Now, Harry.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Harry Cole from The Sun. Jeremy Corbyn has announced £48 billion worth of spending commitments today, but they're very popular with the public in polls. Are you worried about Labour's manifesto's popularity? And given we are at Screwfix today, do you think it would screw or fix the economy?
You can always trust The Sun to come out with a line like that. What I would say to this, I think the people who should be worried about Labour's manifesto are the ordinary working families who will find themselves paying the price for the spending commitments that Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party have put forward. I think the sums have probably been dreamt up by Diane Abbott, and what we see is that actually these policies, they're nonsensical economic policies, would actually damage our economy. Now, if you damage the economy, it means businesses go under, you have fewer jobs, you have less money to put into the National Health Service and other public services. So there's a very clear choice at the election, which is me and my team with a plan and a vision to build a stronger economy for the future, and Labour with plans that I believe would wreck the economy. Now, we'll take...
Thank you. Jack Maitland from the Daily Telegraph. Prime Minister, earlier you told some school children that you're a fan of the Harry Potter books. Can I ask you which character you believe that you're most similar to?
No, you can't ask me that. I don't think I'm similar to any of the characters in Harry Potter, but they're a great read for adults as well as for children. The mirror.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ben Glaze, Daily Mirror. Yesterday in your Facebook Live interview, you said that one of the reasons you support fox hunting is because other ways of controlling fox numbers are more cruel. I'm just wondering if you can set out for us some of the ways that you think are more cruel than a fox being ripped apart by a pack of hounds.
Well, if all you have to do is look at some of the reports that have been done in relation to fox hunting about the problems that can occur when other methods of killing foxes are used. What I also said yesterday was two other things. When it comes to this issue, it will be a free vote of members of Parliament. Each member of Parliament will take their own individual decision on this issue. And actually, I think for most people, as you will have seen from the questions here today, there are other issues that are more important to them in this election. Now, I think we may have some local media here. Do we have the Stoke Sentinel? Yes, the Stoke Sentinel. Excellent.
To ask you a question about school funding, Labour have announced today that they will put billions of pounds extra into school budgets. Will the Conservative Party match this?
Well, first of all, we're all putting record levels of funding into schools at the moment. And of course, we introduced the pupil premium, which ensures there is that extra funding available, focused particularly on particularly disadvantaged children. For our overall schools policy, you will be able to see what we're going to say in our manifesto when that is produced. What we do want to ensure, though, is that we have a fair distribution of school funding across the country. Everybody accepts that there is an unfair system at the moment. We have to get this right. We've put forward some proposals, we've consulted on them, but we need to look, obviously, at the response to those proposals. But I want to see a fair system of funding across the nation's schools, and I want to see a diverse school system where we are able to see every child having a good school place. And I think BBC Radio Stoke are here. Is that right? Yes. Yes. I think this may have to be the last question.
The Royal Stoke University Hospital, which serves the city, routinely fails to meet A&E targets with frequent 12-hour waits for patients. What will the Conservatives do to address this? Can you put a figure on what investment will be seen for our local hospital?
Well, it's what's important in looking at the way hospitals are dealing with A&E. We did put some more money in the budget for some hospitals across the country to ensure that they're able to have the best possible, I was going to say operation, I don't mean it in the medical sense, but organisation in their A&E. What we see in A&E is that sometimes they are put under significant pressure. Sometimes people go to A&E because they're not able to access services elsewhere. So it's not just a question of what you do for the hospital, it's actually how you ensure that there are services available for people to go to elsewhere, such as the 7-day-a-week GP, access to GPs that we want to see. Thank you, everybody. I think that was the last question. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see you.